All right, you're listening to 91.5 WUML Lowell Blues Deluxe, and I have the distinct pleasure of having Bob Corritore on with me. He's a fellow KBA winner, which I found out, and he's a winner of a lot of other things too, and we're going to talk about that in this interview. Welcome, Bob, to the radio show.
John, thanks for having me. An honor.
You're welcome, and it's an honor to have you too. Let me just give the listening audience a little background. I went down to Memphis, was it last week? Somewhere in there last week. And I won the KBA award for 2023. And I met this wonderful gentleman, Bob Corritore, who came over and shook my hand. And I didn't realize that you were a KBA winner.
It was a while. It's an honor. I mean, we devote our life to this music, and it's nice when we get some recognition for that.
Yeah,
thank you for the award, by the way.
Thank you. And I did mention all of you former KBA winners in my acceptance speech, so you'd know that I recognized all of you guys that are there. So tell me about growing up. Where did you grow up, and how did you get into this music?
I grew up, I was born in Chicago, and then when I was quite young, then my parents moved to the north suburbs of Wilmette, which is not too far away from Chicago. And so, I had a suburban Chicago upbringing. And within all of that, there was blues that was around me. There's harmonica. And of course, the pop music of the day occasionally featured rock artists that were very influenced from the blues. But then one day I heard Muddy Waters on the radio, and I'm like, oh, that's everything that I love about music right there in a condensed form. So of course I went on my bicycle to Paul's Recorded Music in downtown Wilmette and picked up a Muddy Waters record, which was the album Sail On, which is basically the best of Muddy Waters. And I was completely turned on to the whole sound. It was just so amazing, because the original song I heard on the radio was Rolling Stone, for the obvious reason that that's where the Rolling Stones got their name. It was being played on rock. But then it's like, wow, this is amazing. I always liked the sound of harmonica in pop music. And then I heard Little Walter playing it with Muddy Waters. And I'm going, this is out of this world. I mean, it was a life-changing experience. And from that point forward, that was the direction my life was headed in. I'd buy Little Walter records and Sonny Boy Williamson records and Jimmy Rogers records and Freddie King and B.B. King records and Big Mama Thornton records. It just kept going from there. And Junior Wells, Hootie Man Blues, of course, all of the classics. And it was just a joy. Every time I went to the record store, I had to buy one or two new albums. And along the road there, I loved the harmonica. My brother had a harmonica. He had picked up a harmonica, my younger brother, and he had learned a couple preliminary steps on there, and he showed them to me. He goes, oh, yeah, you're pretty good at that. I'm just going to give you this harmonica. So then I just kept playing it from there. And it just, it was something that I just became very involved in, and I'd stay home nights and practice against some of these cool blues records and try and emulate what I could in far as the sound. And lo and behold, because I grew up so close to the Chicago area, I could see some blues in my high school auditorium. My very first blues show was the Sam Lay Blues Revival, and that had Eddie Taylor and Detroit Jr., Child Butler and Lucille Spann and Johnny Twist. I mean, it was pretty amazing. And later on, I would get to know many of these artists and work with them. Sam Lay, ironically, I ended up working with a whole bunch, and we became really close friends. And we just lost him not too long ago. Yeah. Also, there was Northwestern University, Barrett College, different things. So I got to see a lot of the shows over there before I was able to get into the clubs. And Blind Jim Brewer played every Tuesday at a pizza joint not too far away from my house, and it was just all right there. And Muddy Waters played my high school gymnasium my senior year. So I'm saying it was all around. And then, once I got into blues, there was a guy named Kerry Baker, who you may know, but he went to school about the same time that I did. He had a blues program on the radio. Then Northwestern University had Best in Blues with Mark Gunshin. So I was, way turned on to all these different things with what was around. You could go to record stores; they had great blues sections. I look at these records and I thought they were just so cool because they were so almost undone with the black and white photos and kind of a classic print like the old Arhoolie records and everything. And it just was very intriguing to me. And the more I got into it, the more I just loved it and loved it and loved it. And the more it just grew. I started playing in bands in high school, and then I went off to college and went to University of Tulsa. And because I played in Chicago style over there, I was working in all these bands in Tulsa while I was going to college. And then I'd come back and I'd sit in with bands in the clubs in the Chicago area. I went and saw Howlin' Wolf and Big Walter, the Aces, and Mighty Joe Young, and Lonnie Brooks before he was on Alligator, Little Mac Simmons, Carrie Bell, Eddie Clearwater. I mean, the list on and on. It was
Yeah.
just, it was an embarrassment of wealth in Chicago in the 1970s. And, you could just go see all of this. And blues was one of those things that was like, it's not put you on a pedestal music. This was real people music. So you go up and meet the artists and they give you encouragement and tips. You let them know that you played harmonica, and they'd call you up sometimes for a number. And I guess I was good enough where they would call me up the next time too. So I kind of got some friendships and all of that. So it was really powerful. I mean, and then the first time this was on the north side. You could go to a lot of the north side clubs, which were very integrated, a wonderful mix of all cultures and colors and types of people. And but then when I went to the black side of town on the west and south side, I went and saw the Howlin' Wolf for the first time, and then I went the following week to see the Aces, Little Walter's old band, and then it just went from there. And so I'm just seeing all of this beautiful culture, black black blues being played for a black audience, which had a real special resonance to it. I can't really describe it, and just being around that music so much, the more I got into it, the more and more I just became lost in it. It was just beautiful. And eventually, I'd worked in a bunch of different bands in high school and in college, but I my first like real blues band I sat in was with John Henry Davis on Maxwell Street, which was pretty powerful. So
Yeah,
he let me.
I was just going to ask you about Maxwell Street.
Yeah, that's nothing you could do when you were not of age. Catch public transportation, go to Maxwell Street and see all these guys playing out in the street. It was like nothing you'd ever seen. And all these vendors were around selling whatever you would want, and then on the street corners, somebody would get a extension cord and just set up a PA system and start playing on the sidewalk or in a corner or in a little breezeway or wherever it was. And some of these bands were so down home, but you could see Big Walter Horton, Big John Rencher, John Henry Davis. You could see Blind Jim Brewer just walking around. You could see gospel music on the street. You could it was like a complete explosion of senses, because you smelled the Polish sausage, you saw all these amazing characters, and you heard all this music, and it was so down home and real. It was just, and a lot of times people would put these makeshift bands together and they have their little kid playing drums and whatever it was, and they pass around remember when we had the wood cigar boxes, they'd have
Yep.
that as a little tip jar, and there'd be one guy designated to walk around the crowd that was listening and get whatever quarters or dollar bills they could get from the people that were listening. It was powerful. I mean, this was Chicago, and Chicago has its own little thing that no other place has, and it's a sound also that when it gets in your head, the true tradition of it is something that's really recognizable, especially if you're a fellow Chicagoan. So if I'm playing with somebody from Chicago, they immediately recognize the style I'm playing when I'm playing Chicago blues. Now, sometimes I play with people that are not playing Chicago blues, and I alter what I play to fit the mood of that. But I'm very much rooted in Chicago blues. And when you're from Chicago, that's always inside of you. It's part of your DNA.
So all those hop players you were seeing on the streets and in the clubs, you must have learned a lot from all of them, little things from each one of them.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just seeing little Max Simmons or Big Walter Horton or Junior Wells or James Cotton. And then there's all the people that were lesser known: Lil Willie Anderson, Big Leon Brooks, Lester Davenport, Good Rockin' Charles, Easy Baby, Golden Wheeler. All those guys were around. They were all great players, but some of them had more celebrity than the others. But you could go and just see all of this rich tradition. I'd go over to Big Leon Brooks' house regularly, and he'd show me harmonica things. Carrie Bell would give me little tips. Big Walter was a little more elusive. One time I said, my buddy asked him, Big Walter, how do you get that tone? And he pointed to his hand and said, it's all in the wrist. But so much happens in harmonica that is, now they've got instruction videos on YouTube and all this stuff. But back then it was kind of a secret little thing, because a lot of the stuff went on in your mouth and people couldn't really see what it was. And those that had it knew it was kind of a coveted secret, but it was kind of cool. And then there were those that just shared, their secrets with me and showed me things that just, opened my eyes to how it was supposed to be done and how it was supposed to sound. So, I mean, truly an amazing thing to learn at the feet of some of the elder statesmen and the greats who were there, who knew Little Walter personally, who, had a beautiful sound that was, just classic and real and cool.
Well, we look at you as a blues harmonica player. You're a record producer, from what I've heard. You're a blues radio show host, and you own a club. And you've supported this music all these years in various different ways. Either you're on the record with someone, you're producing the record with someone, or you're playing harmonica on someone else's record, from what I can see. And there's hundreds of them. I'm looking at all the recordings you've been involved with. And you're like the historian of Chicago and blues, period, with all the recordings you've been on. It's great. Incredible.
Thank you. I mean, it's been my honor to have this path, and I've gravitated towards all of these artists that I love so much, and I've made some great friendships and some great recordings. And when you make a great recording with somebody, and it's just in that room at that moment, everything is alive and happening, and the magic just sets in. That's something you have that you share with that artist for the rest of their life.
Yep.
It's
I was looking through some of the recordings that you've done with various people. I can't even name them all. There's so many of them that you've been involved with. I mean, the networking that you've done with all these musicians. And I'm going to start with this one, Tail Dragger and Willie Buck. Early on, you were involved with both of them.
right, and they're still my dear friends. And it's about 50 years later, not quite. So, but yeah, Willie was my first actual, real blues employer. And this was like in the late 70s. I show up for a gig over at Bootsy's, and I didn't know who I'd be in the band with, but it was Lewis and Dave Myers, who were Little Walter's old players.
Yep.
But was in the band, Big Moose Walker, Odie Payne, who was Elmore James' drummer. I mean, it was unbelievable. And I was friends with Lewis, and I used to hang out with him and get harmonica tips and hear Little Walter stories. But it was the first time I was really on a stage with him. I said, Lewis, I don't know if I'm supposed to be up here with you all. And he's like, you playing, go on. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm in. And then, then that was a wonderful, reinforcement of that. And then after the gigs, we all hang out and just, joke and laugh and party until the sun came up. It was just fun. I mean, those were some really wonderful days to have the youth and to have the moment in time with these artists that you enjoy and be able to share the humor and the fun of it all. It's just great.
There's a lot of you guys from this era that I know of very well. I mean, from the Chicago area, like Johnny Bergen, who came and played on my show not too long ago.
Johnny's great.
I got a story about Johnny Bergen in last week's KBAs. No one knows this.
Okay.
Johnny Bergen was outside trying to get into the ceremonies, and it was sold out, and they wouldn't let him in. And I saw him. I was talking to him outside. He goes, any way I can get in there? I go, I don't know. You have to ask. And he was outside. I don't know if you knew that, but he was out in the foyer waiting to see if he
Oh,
could get in.
well, if I would have known, I would have taken care of him. So, but yeah, we're getting ready to go on a tour in May. We'll be playing in Belgium and Holland and Luxembourg,
Yeah,
and
with Tail Dragger, I saw.
Tail Dragger and Jimmy Primetime Smith. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it'll be a fun time. So, and I've done a similar tour with him years ago, and we had a blast on the road. So, but I didn't know Johnny when I was living in Chicago. He moved to Chicago after I had left. I had left in 1981 to move for 1 year to Phoenix, and here I am, 40 years later, still in
Still
Phoenix.
there.
So
So, like
didn't
I was saying, all the Chicago guys that I know, like Joe Moss and Nick Moss and Toronzo Cannon, and all the guys that in your era of blues artists that are around, Johnny and all those guys that came from Chicago are still there. It's a great group of people.
it is. Although all those guys you just mentioned, they were not part of the scene yet when I was part of it. So they came after all.
After, right? A little
Yeah,
bit after, right?
you're right.
Joe's been around a while. I know Joe Moss has been around. I don't know how long, but he's been around a little while. And Toronzo's been around too, a little bit. Not as long as you, but they've been around. They're the next generation of
They
this.
are. Yeah, and bless them for their youthful age. I mean, they probably have more miles in them than I do, but I'll keep.
But yeah, all of most of them have come and played on my show. So one of these days we're gonna have to get you to come and do it too.
That'd be an honor. I hope I get to do that sometime.
So you moved to Phoenix in '81, right?
Yes, sir.
And you ran into Louisiana Red, or he was there, right?
That's not exactly right, but what happened is that I had played with Louisiana Red at the Delta Fish Market, where they bring up like sets of people, and they put me up with Red, and I was a fan of Red. It just happened that way. I you know you just went and did an impromptu set, and I backed up Red, and Red and I hit it off, and we exchanged numbers, and I told him how much I enjoyed some of the performance because I saw him play at the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival in '78, and I was really knocked out by what he had done, and so we just fell right in together. So he calls me after I moved to Phoenix and says, "Bobby, where are you at?" And I said, "Well, I'm in Phoenix." He said, "Oh, I got your forwarding number." So I called and said, "I was thinking about coming out to." He said, "I'm thinking about coming out to Phoenix because I know Eunice Davis out there." So he went over there trying to, I guess, have with romantic intentions on Eunice, and also to do some gigs with me. So I'm like, okay, well, great. I'll work on getting some gigs, and everything seemed like it was fine initially. And then a week later, I get a call from Eunice. Better come pick Red up because I just threw him out. So 25 roommate, and I became responsible for somebody. But being around Red for that year, we stayed together for a year. We were like a family. It was beautiful,
That's
and
great.
I learned so much. I mean, Red just, I played with Red every day during that time, and he covered so much ground. Lightning Hopkins, Arthur Big Boy Crudup, as well as the Muddy and Robert Nighthawk and the Earl Hooker, which I was already somewhat familiar with. But he'd get into like the earlier Muddy Waters stuff, the Aristocrat stuff, which guys weren't playing in Chicago. So if I was playing with Willie Buck, he would do a more modern version of Muddy, but you could go way, way back further than that with Louisiana Red, and we used to do that regular, and so we got quite a sound together. We do a bunch of our gigs in Phoenix as a duet, and some with a full band, but it was a powerful little thing that we had going.
And you work with Jennifer Magnus. I did an interview with her last week,
Mm-hmm.
and she was in Phoenix for a little while, right? As well.
She had moved from Detroit, and then she was kind of like guesting with certain bands and whatnot. And I was in a band at that time called the Blues Connection. It was kind of a big review band. We had Bob Tate on the saxophone. We had two beautiful sax players. We had Chief Shibude Gilliami on the vocals, and we said, let's add Janova. And so Janova became part of our review and did part of the singing. And then we broke out and formed a band called the Mojo Maddox, which would later become Janova Maddox and the Mojo
Yeah,
Maddox.
she mentioned the Mojo Maddox. So you were in the Mojo Maddox. I didn't know that.
Her and I actually, put it together. And initially we were both leaders, but Janova being the person that she is, she really just had to be the leader. So like, okay, Janova, you just be the leader, and I'll just work for you. So we did that for I think a couple of years, and I got to see her in the early stages of her development. Now, Janova, I have to say, has really been an inspiration to me because she's like a sister, and we got our start in the trenches, and then I've watched her rise and progress, and she did that earlier than I began to get any kind of profile. So I'm like, I got to check in on.
How do I do that, right? How do I get to do that?
Well, let me use her template as my own example, but do it my way because I have a different offering than Janova does, obviously. And so I pay attention. I thanked her for years and years. And then one time I thanked her and she says, Bob, you always thank me for helping you. And I don't know what I've done to help you. And I go, well, you've provided me with an example of how this works. Because I figure if they're going to celebrate my sister, that there might be a little place for me in all of this too. So, but I saw her work with publicists and labels and do a lot of the things that were different than what we did when we were just playing locally in the clubs in Phoenix. So we played when I was with her, we did some regional stuff in Colorado and probably California, but we didn't really get out past that. But Janet all of a sudden started getting big time and doing some really big stuff. And I'm just proud of all of her successes. And it's the way she conducted the Keeping the Blues Alive Award. I thought that was really, really great. She's, kind of taken kind of almost a parental role within the blues, which is cool. So.
Yeah, she was talking about that in the interview and she talked about the Mojo-Matics and how much she enjoyed that band. So that should tell you something too. How's that?
We were a scrappy little fun band that did blues and R&B, and we had Jerome Teasley, who was a former drummer with Junior Walker and the All Stars, and that guy was a firecracker. So we could explode anywhere we wanted to with that band. It was fun. So the band gained some notoriety. And it was good, and but I eventually left that band because I recruited Chico Chisholm to move to Phoenix, and he became my partner for the next 20 years after that. Chico was Howlin' Wolf's last drummer, which is where I met him, and Chico was just a delightful character. And where Janet was going more and more off into like a contemporary blues and soul thing, I thought that Chico would bring it back to a more Chicago blues thing, which was what I was seeking. And that's exactly what happened. We ended up working together. He was my partner for the last 20 years of his life. And initially I said, Chico, come on out, let's do some gigs. He said, Bob Corritore, I'll give you 6 months. So I knew what happened to me where 1 year became a lifetime. But Chico fell in love with Phoenix, and Phoenix fell in love with Chico, and he never looked back. And he went to visit Chicago, but he knew where his new home was, and people just loved Chico. He was a big influence in Phoenix to all sorts of people, just because so kind to everybody and nurturing, and gave everybody encouragement, and was exemplary as a blues man. So, and we had this cool little Chicago blues band going, and we did some very cool stuff. So.
And then in '84, you started hosting a radio show called Those Lowdown Blues.
Yes, sir. Actually, that was before Janova, but yeah. But ironically, Louisiana Red brought me to the station for the first time. He wanted me to play harmonica with him while he was doing a live performance and interview, and I, hit it off with the DJs. And after he left, I'm like, it'd be kind of fun to do a radio show. I think I'd really enjoy it because I have a huge record collection and I just love it. And as a matter of fact, while we're here, pardon the mess, but take a look at this collection here. That's
wow. Look at that.
Just keeps going from there, and that's just part of it. And then there's another room of records also. So anyway, but you can see that I've always been the kind of guy that has loved to like invite friends over and then spin music for them, and then all of a sudden I get to do this on the radio. And so when Red left, I'm like, well, what would it be like? I'll put in a proposal to the station. I know these guys, so they put in a good word for me. Next thing you know, I'm on the air. I'm doing a blues show. I was really a very rough announcer initially. I used to say way too much, as people who announce do. And but they tolerated that for the good music that I was playing. And eventually I got, not that I'm a great announcing voice, but I'm not bad just from doing it for so long, and I feel comfortable. I feel like I'm in my own living room when I'm on the radio, which is a beautiful thing. So, and I'm able to play the music that I've really connected to. Now, my show tends to not be a contemporary blues show. I'm playing most of the music I play from the 50s and 60s. I'm really delving into the roots of it all. And that just seems like that's kind of an aspect that not a lot of radio shows are covering. So people from all over the world check in on my show for that reason. So it's got that little historical thing. So I'm sure you hit a bunch of the historical and a bunch of the contemporary things too. So
Yeah, I do the same. I can go back to the 20s and 30s sometimes, and then I move right into the 50s and 60s, and the real premise for the show that I do, or we started doing, was to promote the music, the current music that's out for people like you guys.
Thank you.
To make sure that you're being heard, because most blues radio shows, before, were just playing the traditional stuff, and it's like there's a whole bunch of things out there that no one's getting to hear, and that was what we try to do.
Interesting. I'm glad that you're doing all of that, because you're covering the whole scope of it. I not as much as you, but I applaud you for what you're doing. Thank you, and thank you for including me as part of that mix. I appreciate that.
Let's talk about your radio show. Can people hear it online?
They can, kjzz.org. Now, we don't have a podcast, but we do this live so they can stream it real time. So it's Mountain Time, Mountain Standard Time, from 6 until 11. It's a 5-hour show.
On Sunday night?
Sunday nights, yes, sir.
And you've been doing it 39 years. Wow.
Well, it just turned 39, yeah.
Yep. Wow. So, congratulations.
Yeah, I guess I'm nothing if not stubborn, huh?
Me too. I'm still doing it too.
I mean, I can't.
You love it. That's why you do it. You love it.
And I learned so much. To me, I'm just a constant student of the music. And so I'll do these subjects of record labels or artists, and I'll study what they've done, and I'll present my work of that week on the show. So each week I keep it fresh because I'm learning more and more. And I delve into things. I'm constantly buying new CDs and new music to be able to present and to be able to explore. So yeah, I just feel like, in life, if you stop being a student, then I don't know, I just can't imagine that. There's so much to learn. There's so much I don't know that I want to know.
Yeah, but your whole life, when I look at all the recordings that you're either on or producing or playing harmonica on, it's mind-boggling, all the different people that you've come in contact with over the years and were able to connect with and work with. That's not easy to do sometimes with musicians.
I've been lucky. Of course, I've got my Chicago background. I knew so many people there, but then I started the rhythm room, and so people who were coming through would be invited to play my club if they called me. And sometimes the older gentlemen that were my heroes would come through, and I'd ask them if they'd want both the gig and a recording session to supplement their tour. And a lot of times they said, yeah. And again, it was one of those things where maybe I knew them a little bit, but after we made a record together, and especially if it was really popping, then, we became connected on a level of the soul of the music.
Yeah.
Like that.
So you had a one-stop shop. You had
I too while they were there. So, it's a pretty cool little thing to be able to do. And, if somebody's coming to California, chances are they got to come through Phoenix. So, back in the day, especially, all the guys were coming through. We had Jimmy Rogers was still touring, and, people that maybe nobody's even heard of, Percy Strother from
I remember him.
Yeah, I mean, he used to come through and play all the time. We're like, yeah, of course, Percy, you got a gig, So we really found a home for people who played and who loved real blues, and because of that, we could sell out the house at Mojo Buford, and not that many people know who he is, but when he came, we'd like Muddy Waters harmonica player, in Kapow, we'd have 2 sold out nights. It was amazing. So
Tell me about Blues on Blues Records, the record label you started.
well, when I was young, I wanted to do something. I was 22 and I started a record label, and I didn't know what to call it. My dad said, "How about Blues over Blues?" And because that spells Bob, and I'm like, okay, that, and that became a name. So I put out 2 releases on that record label. I found out that I really loved producing, and I really hated being a record label because you had to deal with, you know,
Promotion and distribution and all
uh,
that stuff.
getting paid was hard. You know, when you're a small record label and you know, trying to get out maybe a release a year, whatever you could do. But it was very gratifying. I mean, the first record I did, it was in 1979, and it was a Little Willie Anderson record. Little Willie was a valet to Little Walter and played in the style of the later years of Little Walter, which was, you know, kind of a more staccato, rough-edged way of playing, and Little Willie just had that down. And so I put together a bunch of Little Walter alumni, including Robert Lockwood, Jimmy Lee Robinson, Sammy Lawhorn, Freddie Below, and it was a powerful record. I mean, it was just a bunch of people reliving a language that was probably, you know, mostly not being played at that point. But here was this reunion of Little Walter people that were all talking that same language, and they were able to have a beautiful conversation musically with it.
So let's talk about your club, the Rhythm Room Music Room. You opened that in 91, I think.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So that was interesting. I got the opportunity. I had played this club. It used to be called the Purple Turtle with Louisiana Red. Yeah, that was the first gig I ever booked for us. And little did I know that I would end up being the owner of it. Well, the way it's actually, I got a call out of nowhere from the guy that owned the property. He said, "Bob, I'm thinking about opening a blues club. I want you to help me develop this business. I want you to be the kind of figurehead and the guy that's doing this." So with his resources, I got to try out my hand as a club person. You know, I did the booking. There's another guy that he had hired to do the bar side of it, and it was successful. And I learned the ropes. Um, I went into it not really knowing the ropes at all, but just learning as I went along, and it went well. And I had some really good ideas and concepts. And there was a place for it here in Phoenix. People really gravitated to the rhythm room, and it was really a huge run. Now, that was in 1991. 10 years later, of course, September 11th happened, and we had to like figure out how to survive after that, because the psyche of the American culture had just been hurt so badly from that. But for 10 years, it was ridiculous, just a huge run. Then we had to kind of rebuild the business because for a number of months after September 11th, we could have easily gone out of business. But, you know, pure stubbornness kept us going. But
And your
nobody was,
connections helped too. The musicians were still coming, I guess, right?
many were, yeah, yes. It,
That's
uh, it,
good.
it changed a lot of things for a lot of people. But, you know, and, you know, we've been through all sorts of different cycles, and we've learned to get through. So I don't know how I would do it or who I would be without, you know, the club, without the radio show, without touring and playing harmonica and all that stuff. It's just kind of what I've done for so long that it kind of self-defines me. But
And the club's still open today, right?
yes,
Wow. That's incredible.
yeah,
A,
we
ra- a
almost
radio show, a club, you produce, you play on records. That's absolutely fascinating to me that you have all that energy to do all that.
I have a band that kind of the band, Jimmy Primetime Smith and I also work with Bob Margolin and John Primer, and I just worked with kind of an all-star eclectic group in Seattle called the Highway 99 All Stars, which I did a year ago, and they had us back, and that was kind of an interesting mix of great singer-songwriter stuff and some blues and some funk and some soul and some jazz, just like, you know, all these guys were good players. So I'm just sitting there trying to find my spot in some areas that aren't necessarily my wheelhouse, but I enjoyed it just on the basis of how musical all these people were. And I found my little spots and all that, so it was good. And apparently because we did it last year and they want us back, so they want us back this year. So, but now I'm doing a lot of stuff. I've got upcoming dates with John Primer and with I've got a Chicago thing, and I've got Willie Buck and Tail Dragger and a big review. They also have John Primer and Oscar Wilson, a bunch of things there. And Jimmy Primetime and I have 2 tours of Europe. Next month I'll be in Switzerland with Bob Margolin. We're going to do a week over at Marion's Jazz Room, and we do like 11 shows in a week over there. Each one's a 90-minute show. We do 2 per night and then 3 on like Saturday. But by the end of that week, we're just so like tight with our instruments. We're just like really connected. It's one of those things, really a pleasure to be able to play that much in such a warm audience in such a great room, such history in that particular venue. I mean, it's in this very cool hotel that has all these jazz knickknacks. They've got Lionel Hampton's vibraphone. They've got a trumpet that was played by Chet Atkins, just all sorts of stuff. It's just really cool. And then they've got photos of different jazz artists and blues artists up from the different festivals and things that the people who are in there were involved in. So an honor to play Marion's Jazz Room.
You talk about ex-Muddy members. You're involved with some of them now, today. Margolin and John Primer, and it's great.
Mud Morganfield,
Yeah.
I've done stuff, and I've worked with Rick Crayer, and years ago, of course, I worked with Willie Big Eye Smith, and I produced a record by Mojo Buford, and I guess the list goes on. But yeah, I just kind of
It does.
I love Muddy so much. I just kind of fall in with that. It just can't help it. Sam Lay, I work with a lot. He was on the Fathers and Sons, so there's probably a few other connections, and the Wolf connections too. Of course, Tail Dragger, Henry Gray, Chico Chisholm. I fell in with that crowd too.
Yeah, I want you to talk about all that, because that's you're involved with a lot of stuff that the average musician, he doesn't get involved in that, and you are. You connect with all these guys, which is great.
I think I've been able to do, which it took me a while to get this figured out in life, but by having a club and a radio show, and also I've been able to kind of enable the different artists to do some of the stuff that they want to do. Chico said, Bob, before I got with you, I never recorded with as many dudes as I'm doing now, so it was also, so I get to do this for myself, but I also get to do it for Chico, because it was like really so important for Chico to be able to play and be recognized as a great drummer. And that was, it was just, all of it was just adding to the positive of it, so, and, at a point I kind of became my own, I started doing these Bob Corritore and Friends records, and it's become a kind of cool platform for a lot of people, and people are like, yeah, I want to be on one of your records, and so if we can arrange it, I'll have different people, and I try and bring out a different aspect of who they are than they might do on one of their own records. And it's pretty cool. So,
So in 2007, a lot of stuff happened with you in 2007. You lost Chico.
Yeah.
And then the city of Phoenix proclaimed you Bob Corritore Day. How do you like that?
It's quite an honor, and I kind of laugh about it. It's funny because like a radio interviewer said, so what was it like? You're like, oh, I had a great time. It was a wonderful party. Next day I was a little bit tired, and I just had a little bit of a headache. I guess the day afterwards just wasn't my day. So bad joke, sorry. Anyway, but no, it was yeah, it's nice to have the local politicians recognizing your contribution to the community. So that was a pretty cool thing.
And you won the KBA that year too.
I did. Yeah, so that was nice, and that was right after Chico had passed, and I remember that it was almost hard to not cry during my acceptance speech because Chico was such a part of it, So I told the story of Chico just passing. I lost my dear friend, and but that was what was going on, and that was the speech I gave. And but it was yeah, literally it was just days after we had Chico's funeral, which we chose to have at the Rhythm Room because Chico's home was the Rhythm Room. Chico used to call. He'd say, "When are you going to come play my club?" They go, "You got a club, Chico?" The Rhythm Room. And they look at me, "Is that Chico's club?" I go, "Absolutely."
And
God,
then that
God,
same year, you were nominated for a Blues Music Award too.
okay, yeah. I think that was
Dave Riley record, "Traveling the Dirt Road."
yeah. We started doing some stuff with Dave, and that was pretty cool. Yeah. So Dave had just moved from the Chicago area, but he was a guy originally from Mississippi, and he really played more in like a Mississippi juke joint style. Played some elements of Chicago, but what I'm saying is, but you know, we played together for 15 years, and then unfortunately with COVID, he got it, and he was on a ventilator for 3 weeks. Somewhere in there, had a stroke, so he's unfortunately unable to play. We're hoping that he can rebound enough to get back to playing. It may or may not happen, but we are thankful for whatever little bit of progress we get with Dave. And he just had some great grandbabies, and so he's pretty happy about that. So he's got
And
some
and then a Grammy nomination the next year for a Pinetop Perkins record that you were part of.
yeah. Well, that was Pinetop's Grammy nomination. I can't say it was mine, but I did participate in a.
Well, there you go. You did. You were part of it.
Okay, thank you for saying that. But I've been corrected by my record label. It says, you can't say that you're Grammy nominated. I go, but if you want to say it, you can say it. But I can't really say it because it's not exactly accurate. It's not my record that was there. But I was on a Pinetop Perkins record that got nominated, and that was a beautiful thing.
And
So
then a Kim Wilson record too, right?
that was, I think, before that, and I had co-produced the album "Smokin Joint," which was done mostly live at the Rhythm Room with Kim, and we put out a little dandy of a record there, and it went out. And it got a nomination, so I got to go to the Grammy Awards on both those occasions, and be part of the celebration. So it was kind of nice to be there in that very select group of people that were being honored as nominees.
So let's talk about the other awards. 2011, you got an award for Best Historical Blues Release, Bob Corritore and Friends. Was that the first Bob Corritore and Friends record, or was there were there ones before that?
I did this record that wasn't called that, but that was the first one called Bob Corritore and Friends. So yes, but my very first record was done in 1999 for High Tone Records, and it was Bob Corritore All Star Blues Sessions, and it had this beautiful kind of checkerboard cover, a little bit not exactly square, but it had in each of the different rectangles or odd shaped squares, whatever you would call them. There was different names. I had all these cool people I had recorded with at the Rhythm Room for a period of time. So I waited until that year because my parents were in ill health. I didn't want to start something that might take me away from being able to look out after them. And so my dad died in 94 and my mom in 98. And in 1999, I put out that record and said, okay, here's this chapter of my life now. So, and everybody was like, wow, this is a pretty cool record with all these great guest artists. But who the hell is this Bob Corritore? So I'm like, hey, here I am. So
And then a Living Blues Award in 2012. I mean, all these awards. It's great. You keep getting them.
it's been nice when you get some recognition. I mean, we don't do it for awards, but to have the reaffirmation of that means that somebody's appreciating what you're doing. And we work so hard. All the musicians work so hard to put out these records, and we put all of our love and all of our soul and everything that we have in our humanity into these albums. Put them out into the universe, and we hope people will love them. And within all that, I've got a following of my own little following of people that are incredibly loyal to me and they love me. But then when you get an award, it like kind of goes even further than that. It's like, okay, well, I guess this is good enough for somebody to say this was the best. So, I mean, it's hard to say. I don't think there's a best anything. I think that there's just different approaches and what's your preference. But yeah, I'm looking at like the awards for like the records and the artists in this year's nominations. I'm up for 2, and anybody could win, and it would be great. I'm just happy to be considered as a nominee. It's wonderful if you win. That adds extra shelf life to a record, or gives you extra clout to do some booking and touring and things like that. But again, it's not really about that. I mean, if I never got a nomination or award, I think I'd still be doing this. But it does help you, and you can see the value of it. So
I was looking at some of the guest harmonica um, playing that you've done on some records, and I saw a name that I did an interview with this gentleman, Dave Mason. Tell me about that.
well, I can't tell you that much, but the guy who helped me out with the Pinetop Perkins thing, who put me on that Pinetop Perkins record, really was a fan of my harmonica playing, Peter Carlson. And so he had talked with Dave Mason, and Dave wanted a harmonica on a particular track. And he says, well, I know this guy that would do a great job for you. So they sent me the track, and I laid down some harmonica, and Dave sent me a nice email that he really liked it. And, but I never have talked with Dave since. So I hope that maybe someday I'll get a chance to say, hey, I'm the guy that laid down the track on your album. But it was a fun track to do. And we did Come On In This Kitchen. And I played the way I play, and he loved it. So it made me happy.
Good. And then William Clark, one of the William Clark records you were involved with.
Well, Bear Family had asked me if I would work with Jeanette, William Clark's wife, and do a compilation. So I wanted to make sure it was really respectful to everybody involved, and Jeanette really helped me out. And I cleared everything with her. I'm like, okay, I think this would be the 10 songs that we want to have. It was an LP only special release, and we went through the non-alligator stuff they had done, and we had all of that to go. So I reviewed the songs, and I told her what I thought some of my favorites were. She said, those are my favorites too. So we got great. It was wonderful working with her and talking William Clark, and she had some songs I had never heard before by William. She sent them my way. We go, oh, we got to include that one. That's so cool. So we put that out, and it was just, to be able to be a harmonica player honoring another harmonica player, especially someone as great as William Clark. And William was like I think a definitive West Coast guy. And I'm a Chicago guy, so I'm not exactly that, but he gave me a lens to look at how he played, and just to be able to review his material and to really spend the time on that record. I think we ended up making a beautiful record. I think it turned out pretty spectacular.
Did you ever get to see any of the West Coast guys when you were growing up? Like James Harmon, or one of Muddy's guys was George Harmonica Smith.
George, I didn't get to see till I moved to Phoenix. So moving to Phoenix, you're in a closer proximity. But there's a guy named King Solomon, and he was the brother of Little Howlin' Wolf. There were 2 Little Howlin' Wolves, but he was the thinner of the 2 Little Howlin' Wolves. So he came to Chicago, and he sang some really wonderful blues, which was a lot more uptown and sophisticated than his brother did. So it was cool, and he was a brilliant singer, just very clear voiced and very uptown. And so I guess there were a few West Coast guys that would come in, but Chicago was kind of its own little world at that point. After I left, it became a different thing. A lot of budding blues musicians who were coming from Japan and other parts of Asia came and settled in and became part of the scene and added a lot to the scene. It was just interesting, because blues is such a melting pot of cultures. It's such a bridge that brings people all around the world together. And of course, it comes from the Black heritage of this music that is, a hard-earned heritage, but it creates this celebration from the pain that it arose from. And there's something just very spiritual about looking at blues in that context. And if you can connect with that to me is everything.
I didn't realize that you do a master class during the IBCs for harmonica at the IBCs.
Yeah, they asked me to do this years back, and I've done it now, I think 5 times. It's been really fun. And I meet people, and it's really gratifying. A lot of really good harmonica players will come in, and they'll just enjoy my perspective on the instrument. So I don't think there's like I always start out like, everybody in this class is a master in their own way. And so I'm not going to be the final authority. I'm just going to give you what I have, and I hope you enjoy it. So whatever I have, you can have. And I tell them my little philosophies and trade secrets and show them a little bit of technique and some of the things that I've pioneered in the instrument that are unique to my playing. And people seem to really enjoy it. And there's discussions, and people have some really cool things to say. And it's pretty interesting for me, very powerful. And people who have been there have told me how much they've enjoyed it. So that gives me a very good feeling to be able to have that role.
Do you see any local harmonica players that excite you that are younger than you that are up there starting out?
You mean local as in
Local.
Phoenix?
Yeah, in Phoenix.
Yeah, Phoenix, we got an amazing little harmonica culture. There's a guy named Bill Tarsha. When I came to town, he was the guy playing harmonica. He has a band called the Rocket A8s. And ironically, after his drummer passed away, he switched to drums and kind of just band leads. And occasionally we get him to play harmonica, but it's hard to get him to play harmonica because he's such a perfectionist. He wants to have like a full show if he's going to play harmonica. He wants to have everything exactly like he wants it. But occasionally we get him to play harmonica. And once a year we do this harmonica showcase, and we have about 30 Phoenix harmonica players that play, and they're all great. And they're various ages and various levels, but each year everybody gets a little bit better. And it's just so enjoyable because everybody gets up for their one number, and then we all play. And at the end of it, we all have been treated to the best of what each one has to offer. So it's really a beautiful thing. But no, there's a lot of really cool players that are around, and some really beautiful young ones. So I'm enjoying all of that, so.
I bet you are. I get to see some new blood out there.
Well, and it's cool when somebody says, I heard this record and this changed me. I heard your record with Dave Riley, and it was the most juke joint record that I could ever even imagine. It was a contemporary record that was so traditional, and that really gave me inspiration, and people have said stuff like that to me, or I show them a particular thing. I don't know. It's just cool. If you can touch somebody that way, again, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to touch somebody. This music touches your soul. It's an expression of your humanity. And so when you give it out to somebody, you're putting your most vulnerable part of you out there for people to enjoy, hopefully, and to be critical of if that's where they want to be. But we do the best we can, and when it connects with people and they love you for it, that's part of the whole deal right there. That's what makes it work for me. So
let's talk about the latest record that you have out.
Okay, well, the latest record just came out yesterday. That's with Jimmy Primetime Smith. It's The World in a Jug.
Yep.
And Jimmy moved to Phoenix 7 years ago. And the first couple of years, he was on the road quite a bit with Sean Holt, the son of Magic Slim. So he was working in that band. But he's kind of settled into Phoenix, and we've just really been working a lot. But we worked from the first day he came into town. I'm like, meet me at the Rhythm Room. I'm doing one of these harmonica showcases, and I want you to join me. So we played 2 numbers together. I had actually met him in the late 70s when he was playing guitar in Chicago with Big Walter Horton. And I met him at the time, and he was younger than me, but I didn't realize it because he's like 6'2" and big guy. And, I go, okay, this guy's kind of funny. He's a little kind of a goof because he was so young, And then we will laugh about it now because he's been through all of life's, ups and downs. But he's come in town, and we just have our bag, we just play. And I'm excited because this is kind of his year. We put out this record. He was on the cover of Living Blues magazine, and we've got a couple of tours of Europe together. So we're going to go show him how we do it, and it's a beautiful thing. So Jimmy's a great guitar player, a very cool singer, a really good front man, but he's also a really good side man. So I use him on a lot of sessions. So, John Primer oftentimes says just have one guitar because another guitar will get in my way. But with Jimmy Primetime Smith. Jimmy never had somebody. He's like, "Oh, bring Jimmy." Yeah, of course, have him on the session. Of course, have him on the gig. Jimmy's in. So, but he's a guy who can really step out as a front man and play just a fantastic show, leading the band, and then he can step back into a sideman role and play exactly what's called for, nothing extra, with no competition or ego or any of that. So he's the perfect guy in any recording session. And plus, he knows all the Chicago blues. You can get off into a more contemporary thing, into the BB and Albert King thing. You can also get off into soul music and R&B, and he's just very well versed. So real joy to be sharing the stage with Jimmy Primetime Smith. And on the 25th of this month, we're going to do our CD release party. So we're excited about that. So
Yeah, and I'm going to be playing the whole thing on the show coming up. I think it's the 20th. 2 weeks from today.
Right before our CD
Yeah.
release party.
How do you like that?
Thank you for that. Yeah.
So tell me about traveling and the festivals that you've been on. What's your favorite festival to play, or have you played?
That's a hard question. I mean, I've loved so many of the great festivals. A
memorable one.
Well, Monsters in Sweden has been really great to me. I played that a number of times. Lucerne has been great to me. I've enjoyed all sorts of experiences all around. I can't even put my finger on it because each one has its own magic, But again, I've mentioned a couple of them that I've played regularly at. It's been really wonderful to do that. And
I know it's a hard question when you've played in so many of them.
Well, I don't want to leave anybody out. I'm just trying. The Spring Blues Festival in Belgium has been great. I'm getting ready to play the Moulin Blues Festival for the second time. That's in Holland. That's a great festival. But each one has its own little offering, its own vibe to it. So I really dig all of it. It's so wonderful. And every place you go, it's its own little story. There's that country's cuisine. There's all sorts of cool stuff. Of course, I played Chicago Blues Festival a number of times, blast over there, and Mississippi Valley Blues Festival, and just all those festivals are great, but each one's a different great. The King Biscuit Blues Festival is amazing, and that really connects me with my fans from the South. I love that festival.
So let's talk about the archive release, the releases that you do, and I'm guessing these are from the Rhythm Room, correct?
Well, they're not exactly from the Rhythm Room, but they're from the journey the Rhythm Room has allowed me. So when we opened up on September 18th, 1991, I started bringing people like Jimmy Rogers and Luther Tucker in, and different people, and I was able to put them in the recording studio. And so, and I was recording them so frequently, there's no way that I could put all that stuff out, and so I just started getting this archive of different things. Sometimes I'd grab one song from a recording session and there'd be other great songs, but I would just move on to the next thing, and whatever was the last thing I did was maybe the most exciting to me at that time or whatever. So some stuff just got put on the shelf unintentionally, and it's like, well, I got to get that out eventually. So during the pandemic, you're sitting there and going, well, I hope I survived this pandemic, because the people that were dying, we just didn't know. I lost a number of friends to COVID, which is very sad. Bless Paul Osher and Tomcat Courtney and a bunch of other people I know that passed away. It's hard. It's hard just to see that happen. But then you ask yourself the questions: so what do I really want to do, and what's important to me, that I get done right away, just in case there's not a tomorrow in my future. And from there, the Valse recordings came into play, and I'm like, okay, I better get this stuff out while I can, while there's an audience that knows who these artists are, while I'm young enough and have the energy and the resources to be able to do this. Let me do this, because I'm not getting any younger. And what am I going to do, wait for 10 years to do it? No, now has got to be the time. So I'm going to have 4 Valse recordings out this year, with the Jimmy Primetime Smith being the first one. And that's probably the youngest of all the Valse recordings, because that's only over a 7-year period. But after 5 years, um, I guess that kind of makes you ineligible for like a new release by many people's standards. So, um, but some of these things, later this year, I'm going to put out a Chicago anthology of different Chicago artists called High Rise Blues, and that will cover a 30-year span from 1992 to 2022. And that'll have everybody from Jimmy Rogers to Bo Diddley to Coco Taylor to John Brim to Pinetop Perkins to Willie Big Eye Smith to on and on. I mean, it's just and
How many recordings do you have in the vault right now?
more than I could even imagine. I mean, I go through this and I just discover things that I forgot that I ever had. And go, we recorded this, you know. So
And
I
how
did
did you record in the beginning? What were you recording to? Tape?
well. I since I had some prior recording experience in Chicago when I had the Blues Over Blues record label, yeah, I knew what it was like to go into the recording studio. So I would just go in the studio, and I have a very good friend by the name of Clark Rigsby who has Tempest Recording, and Tempest is yeah, I've watched it grow. Clark and I have both grown through the years, but it's become for for I guess most of these 30 years, it was the place where I record. I think initially it wasn't quite up to full band stuff. So the engineer and co-producer Clark Rigsby would bring me to other studios. But then when he got his place rocking, we never looked back because he just knows how to make a good sounding room and how to put everything in place. And so, yeah, I do almost everything I do over there. Occasionally I'll do some stuff at another studio. We just did a session over at Greaseland with John Primer, and that's always fun to play over there. But Clark is my guy that I work with the closest, and pretty powerful. He just records really, really well. Gets a very clear sound, and it's just, I mean, he really is a masterful engineer by any standards. So people who come from all around the country will go and will record over there, and they'll go, "This studio is really amazing." And Clark just has it together. We go in there and he's worked the whole day before to get it set up so that we can go there and quickly record. There's no he's got a great house drum kit, and you can hear what I mean, it's already set up as far as the drum sounds and things like that. So you can go in there and within, 15, 20 minutes, half hour max, you've got everything you need, including a headphone mix to go in and start recording. So I've been to some studios where you record and they're doing drum sounds and that. You're waiting 2 hours before you're even able to record. By the time you get to recording, you've lost so much of the focus and spunk that you would put into that recording. But it doesn't happen like that over at Tempest Recording. So big kudos to Clark Rigby.
So in the beginning, were you doing 16 track, 2 track, 4 track? What were you doing for recording in the
Okay,
beginning?
well, when I was just in Phoenix and I recorded this Louisiana Red record of him solo, because I knew I was living with him and I knew all these different aspects of things he brought. So I did this record that came out on Earwig many, many years later. But we did things on an 8-track, and we were so poor at the time that we actually put 3 songs on the 8 tracks. We did just 2 tracks for vocal and guitar, and then we put a track in between it. Did the other 2 tracks for another song, put a track in between it, and the other tracks. It was not the way to do it. I would never do it now. And now with digital, you've got unlimited space. But
Yep.
back then it was expensive, and studio time was expensive, and money was not a thing that we had enough of to do all we needed to do. So
When we did the live bands that I started back in 94, 95, we were doing a 2 track to a cassette and then DAT and then digital after that.
okay.
But
Well,
now I have a 96 channel board. We do it multi-track. Everything is multi-track now.
that's cool.
So if you came in, we could record you multi-track, which would be. I just did Gabe Stillman not too long ago. We got a great recording of him.
I just played with him in Memphis, so that was cool. Yeah, nice young man. Well, cool. That's great. Well, I hope I get to take you up on that offer sometime.
You could take me up anytime you want. Just let me know when you're going to be in the area, and you just come right in. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'm kind of I mean, I don't have an agent. I'm not like doing tours. I need to spend a certain amount of time to run my radio show and my nightclub. But if somebody calls for me to play a festival or do this, I'm there. So
Yeah.
that's how it kind of goes. And, uh, I really got my biggest boost of my career in Europe because when I went over there, all of a sudden people went nuts over my story and who I was. And I got so popular in Europe that people in the United States had to start paying attention, I guess. So it was pretty amazing. The French especially really embraced me, but all the countries in Europe have been great. So, but a couple of French promoters gave me my start in Europe, and still great friends with them today. So,
That's great. How do people find out about you? You have a website?
well, I have a website. I also have a newsletter, so people can go on the website and sign up for the newsletter. I'm on Facebook. I'm fairly prominent there. I post a lot of historical photos and blues, as well as a lot of my own activities. So if somebody wanted to find out about me, they could go to my Facebook page, which I think is facebook.com/Bob Corritore. And I've got two pages. One's my friend page, which is usually, if it's not maxed out, it's almost there. But that's not really what I'm posting. I do it on my musician page, which is just one where you follow it. You can't sign up as a friend on a musician page, but
Right.
I've got quite a following there, and it's pretty cool. So I can post certain things, and people are like, "Okay, that's pretty cool." They get shared a lot, and it seems like it's been pretty cool. I think I'm well above 80,000 followers at this point. So
That's great. Well,
yeah.
Bob, I want to say thank you for you took quite a bit of time this afternoon with me.
Whatever you need, I'm at your service. I really appreciate all the hard work that you've done to keep the music alive. You are certainly a worthy recipient of the Keeping the Blues Alive award. And what a pleasure it is to talk with somebody who is so grounded in the blues as you. You ask some really wonderful questions. You really know how to interview. And I hope I gave you a good interview and gave you some good answers.
Great interview. A lot of great insight into your history and the things that you've been involved with all these years. It's been great to talk to you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much, and good luck to you and your wonderful blues show and your efforts to keep the music alive. Bless you for that, John.
Thank you, and look forward to continuing to connect with you when if you ever come locally or you need any promotion for anything that you're doing, let me know.
Thank you so much. That's a very kind and generous offer. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you
Take care.
again.
All right.
Nice talking to you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.